Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théâtres, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
President Trump has been holding more rallies lately, and Fox News has been airing them live. Usually CNN and MSNBC have not been, but his comments at rallies typically become big news afterwards. Criticizing John McCain and George H.W. Bush, mocking the Me Too movement, insulting Senator Warren's heritage. It's all newsworthy, right? Wrong, according to Vox editor-at-large Ezra Klein. He says we are giving these rallies way too much attention. I spoke with him earlier, and here's what he said.
Yes, it is all shocking and childish and immature and petulant and cruel. I mean, John McCain is dying. But he's been doing this for years. There's nothing new here. There's nothing new in him calling Elizabeth Warren Pocahontas. There's nothing new in him attacking John McCain. Nothing new in him attacking the Bushes. And yet, whenever Donald Trump wants to change a subject, he just sets up a rally and then goes and says crazy stuff. And I do wonder at this point what information is being encoded in that.
Well, this mockery of the Me Too movement, that was new at the rally on Thursday night.
What? Donald Trump's existence is a mockery of the Me Too movement. The fact that he has given rise to a joke, I don't really agree. Like, I don't agree this is new. I'm not attacking, by the way, CNN. Vox covers this too. I cover it. I tweet about it. I want to be super clear here. I am not outside the machine looking in and criticizing it.
Yeah, I understand.
I'm inside the machine looking out and wondering what the hell we're all doing. So, like, I do want to ask the question. One, what are we crowding out when we give these rallies? When we let him decide what we cover every time he does a rally, right? What are we crowding out? What would have happened in another administration? How long of a story would Scott Pruitt have been?
Right.
How long of a story would Bill Shine have been?
And I'm part of the problem, I think, because I wrote a story titled "Trump Calls Journalists Bad People" at a rally a week after a newsroom shooting.
I'm actually a little more sympathetic to that specific story.
So I think the argument there is that we need to point out when he's using dangerous rhetoric in the wake of a tragedy. But I through his sheer force of talking, right, through the volume of what he says at rallies, it's true he generates dozens of stories that do crowd out other important issues.
I want to be super careful there, because this is a thing I think we do in the media. We put the verbs on him and not on us. Through his sheer force of talking. Like Donald Trump is Black Bolt in Marvel Comics, and every time he opens his mouth, buildings shatter. That isn't how this works. Through our decisions about what to cover, through our outrage at what he is saying, through our belief about what our audience is going to click on, we make these decisions. Look, I am a week and a half back from Bookleaf. I was oceanside in California, and I was pretty far away from all this for a little while I was trying to think about other things in politics. And it's a pretty amazing experience for me. I mean, I've not stepped out of the news cycle for more than 2 weeks in 15 years. The experience of not having it swirling around me I found a pretty profound one. And the experience of coming back, I've been trying to think about how to explain it to people. The experience of coming back is having somebody shouting in your ear all the time. Like having Donald Trump follow you around on Twitter and on the news and everywhere and say, like, look at this thing I did. Look at it. And you think, oh, that's terrible. Like, why did you do that? I was trying to work on this thing about the economy, but yeah, and then he's like, look at this other one. And it's up to us to decide whether to look. But it is our choice, right? We chose not to cover these things when other presidents did them, these kinds of speeches and rallies in the same way, because we found them boring. We don't find Trump's thing boring. He activates something visceral and human in us, right? It's not boring. I always say that the way Donald Trump behaves would make you worried if it was behavior that you saw in your spouse or your employee or your friend or your neighbor.
But that's why
it speaks to something very normal.
Ezra. That's why
I don't agree.
Covered.
Not after it stops giving us valuable information.
It is Tuesday, the 10th of July of 2018, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam, and our daily special is Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. That's right, folks. Just a little dash, a scant bit of hot Hungarian paprika. Yes, it makes all the difference. Mm-hmm. Though, I sometimes denigrate Old Bay, but it does make a good shrimp boil, and I think maybe I'll do that today. Yeah, later on, because today is Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. Yes. So it was Kavanaugh. We all knew it was going to be Kavanaugh. You didn't think that the woman even had a chance, did you? Not that she would be, many times she might have been worse. But I don't think Putin liked the lady. And Kavanaugh seems, to be the type that softens up the country for the ultimate takeover. Isn't that the end game here? Even those Republican senators from the Appropriations Committee that went to Russia on July 4th are coming back. Maybe they're chagrined. Maybe they didn't realize that their faces would be plastered all over the world. Juxtaposed against their social media proclamations about what a great country America is on the July 4th holiday, and here we are having hot dogs, apple pie, and fireworks right here in Middle America when they were in Russia. Well, they're coming back now and saying, boy, dealing with Putin is like dealing with the mob. Yeah, well, welcome to America, fella. Well, I don't know. It is a little bit like the shop owner who took a little favor, and now he's afraid of getting his legs broke if he doesn't keep paying. So, yeah, seems a little bit like that. Speaking of which, Brian Stelter, whatever this guy, CNN purity troll. Brian. This idea that. And that was also Ezra Klein debating with Seltzer there about the propriety of covering the Trump rallies. Seltzer says, well, it's news. I mean, there was something new that came out. We had to get the news. And, of course, these Nuremberg rallies are meant to manipulate the media. And then Seltzer comes out today and is like, a correspondent on Fox News felt afraid at the protests in front of the Supreme Court building last night. Yeah, she was afraid of brown people is what it was. She had never seen that many non-blondes, for quite a while, probably, if ever. And Seltzer is out there proclaiming, well, no journalist should feel threatened when covering a story. Well, tell that to little Katie Tour. Or how about Jorge Ramos? Duly ejected. Come on, Brian, where were you? I got to tell you, Brian, you didn't say diddly about Jorge. So, normalize it. Make excuses. The next thing you know, Friedensdorfer and the People's Court. And I'm not talking about Judge Judy. I'm talking about the original German People's Court. Oh, yeah. Here we go. Kavanaugh. All right. Well, that makes a lot of sense. And with all the other... the kids. The Thai kids. The athletes and their coach got saved. All of them. Quite a feat. So, be nice if we could find the 3,000 babies they lost. When I say they, I mean the Trump administration. Mm-hmm. Maybe they're going to go up, since Trump and the Russians were only talking about adoptions at Trump Tower. Maybe this is the kind of adoptions they were talking about. Confiscating kids at the border and adopting them out as cheap labor in white utopia Russia. Stranger things have been speculated, I'm sure. All right, what's on the rest of the menu? Well, continuing in the Bistro Cafe part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. A black woman in hospice care died after the utility company cut off the power to her oxygen tank. Hey, a contract's a contract, right? Oh, except when you made a contract with the U.S. military to serve and then get your citizenship. They can break that just, because they can. Cambridge Analytica whistleblower Christopher Wylie connects the ouster of UK Foreign Secretary Boris Johnson to Russian meddling in America. They're on it over there. I wish we could get on it here. And records show the psychiatrist prescribing powerful psychotropic medications, that would be psychotropic medications, to immigrant children has practiced without board certification to treat children and adolescents for nearly a decade. Oh, nice. Well, maybe he trained overseas. You never know. After the break, and when I say overseas, I'm sorry, in some, contracted military capacity. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where Australia takes the advice of far-right strong borders advocate Lauren Southern and kicks her out. Hey, we're just taking your advice. We got some strong borders here. Out, matey. And today's World Cup semifinal between France and Belgium shows off the success of European immigration. In this reporter's opinion, of course. Allez, below! All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Allez, blow! Bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com. On the rightish of the page is the chat room link. Just locate it there. That's a good way to engage with us. Kelly Lincoln, Roaring Girl, monitors that. So say hi. There'll be other people there too. Say hi. To the leftish of the chat room link at the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, you'll notice the contribute donate buttons, which will be, if they aren't deactivated, they should be. But they will be activated soon, getting the links and all that set up. So, okay. Yeah, backbone stuff. Got to take care of it. Darn. But thank you for your generosity. It keeps the lights on here, and I'm not kidding. We are unable to do this without you. So we'll be making a treatise for you to start anew in helping us resist this terrible scourge upon our political landscape. You can follow Netroots Radio on Twitter at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that platform. I'm supposed to take care of Facebook. And I keep telling you, Facebook takes care of itself. It does what it wants to do. And it does. So there. Follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam. And let's see, I also post the show notes and links diary on Daily Co's. I'm there as Justice Putnam. Links should be on social media platforms to the show notes and links diary, an integral part of the show. And also, well, some people actually did some real work in the reportage, and that's the source of the sources. Oh, let's see. Follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West, and we're on Facebook as West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. How easy is that? And also podcasts of the show can be had by way of iTunes, TuneIn, Spreaker, Stitcher, and other fine platforms where podcasts of fine quality and dubious quality can be found. We're in there somewhere. Dubious for sure. Okay, let's start off with this first story. It's this is maddening. The NAACP actually considers her death a human rights violation. Her death being Linda Daniels, who was a New Jersey woman who died last week after the utility company cut off the power to her home, rendering useless the oxygen tank she needed to breathe. Linda Daniels, 68, was in hospice care. Her family told local media they used a smaller oxygen reserve while her power was shut off and called emergency services when the reserve ran out. Paramedics brought a portable unit to the house while Daniels' family called the utility company and pleaded with them to turn the power back on. Eventually, Daniels' heart failed. We put one ice pack by her side and one on the other side, Daniels' daughter told 6ABC. We were fanning her. It was so hot in there, she couldn't breathe. It was unbearable. The temperature where Daniels lived in Newark, New Jersey, reached into the 90s that day. The power was apparently shut off because Linda had fallen behind on payments. As of May 29th, she reportedly had a balance of about $1,800. Well, $1,800 obviously is the price of a human life now, isn't it? They could have just broken her legs, but we're way beyond that now, aren't we? There is evidence she was working to pay off her balance. Other bills indicate she sent $300 in April, $450 in another month, and $500 on July 3rd, just 2 days before she died. She had just paid $500 days before, her daughter Desiree said, and she's a senior. We asked them, why are you turning off her electric at the pole? Fuckers. But Desiree said the utility company told her to stop calling them because there were already too many tickets in the system. She said the utility company said they were on their way to the home, but no one ever came. The daughter also said that her mom's medical equipment was registered with the company, though the utility company told another TV station they had not been notified of the device and were unaware of Daniel's medical needs. Really? Are you sure? Linda's death, according to the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, was a human rights violation. In a report last year, the association called for, quote, the establishment of a universal right to uninterrupted energy service, and reported a number of stories similar to Daniel's. In Maryland, according to the report, a man had to use an electric generator to power his home after losing service. He was killed, along with the 7 children, after carbon monoxide from the generator poisoned the family in their sleep. Another woman in New York lost 3 children after a candle she used to light her home after losing power started a fire, and a man in Michigan died of hypothermia after his power was shut off. And to make matters worse, these deadly conditions will only worsen in years to come. Extreme heat and cold with climate change will only make inequality and injustice worse. In New York State, some of the highest electricity costs in the nation, more low-income customers and communities of color represented on the Public Service Commission, and they need more people on the Public Service Commission, and involved in energy policy, decision-making, and regulation. Well, power to Daniel's home was restored the day after her death, and Newark police are investigating the incident. Oh, I might have failed to mention that first article was by Addie Baird out of Think Progress. So, excuse me for my oversight. Oh, my. Okay, next up here on in the Bistro Cafe part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays, is an article. Here we go. I'm sorry, I have to get the link open. I'm a little late on that. Bob Brigham out of Raw Story brings us this next article. As the conservative Tory government of the United Kingdom appears to be collapsing shortly before Donald Trump's first visit to Britain. What's wrong with my mouth today? Darn. A whistleblower at the Center of Investigations into Russia meddling in the 2016 presidential campaign is sounding the alarms that the same tactics were used by Vladimir Putin to sow political instability on both sides of the Atlantic. Not according to Glenn Greenwald, though. UK Foreign Minister, that's a whole different story. UK Foreign Minister Boris Johnson joined Brexit Secretary David Davis in resigning from the cabinet of Conservative Prime Minister Theresa May. Whistleblower Christopher Wylie, who worked for SCL, the England-based parent company of Cambridge Analytica, reminded of the impropriety that caused him to come forward. Wylie has been seeking to draw the connections between the Brexit campaign and Russian meddling. He also testified in all 4 U.S. federal investigations into Facebook. The company learned that there were segments of the population that responded to messages like "drain the swamp," or images of border walls, or indeed paranoia about the deep state that weren't necessarily reflected in mainstream polling or mainstream political discourse that Steve Bannon was interested in to help build his movement. And Wylie told that to the Senate Judiciary Committee in May. And Wylie told NBC News that Cambridge Analytica was meeting with future campaign manager Corey Lewandowski and chief strategist Steve Bannon in 2015, prior to the start of the Trump campaign. Ooh. He also suggested billionaire Robert Mercer was using Cambridge Analytica to illegally fund money to the UK Independence Party during the Brexit campaign. And that was funneling money. You have to remember, Wylie testified before a British Parliament committee, part of the brilliance of Cambridge Analytica is it doesn't need to make money because it's Robert Mercer's project. Robert Mercer is a billionaire. He doesn't need to make money. They can just throw it all away. Actually, they won't throw it all away. They'll still have a few billion left, to sort of make it through while they're uncomfortably poor. Well, together with 2 other whistleblowers, Wylie said he reported vote leave to the Electoral Commission, the Information Commissioner's Office, and the Metropolitan Police for breaches of electoral and data protection law. He reported Leave.eu's dealings with the Russian embassy to the National Crime Agency and intelligence services. Cheating is banned in elections because it creates undue influence on the electorate, Wylie noted. If there are no consequences, why would any future campaign bother following the law? Indeed. Last article here at the Bistro Cafe, part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays, is Out of Salon by Aura Bogado. the psychiatrist who has been prescribing powerful psychotropic medications to immigrant children at a federally funded residential treatment center in Texas, has practiced without board certification to treat children and adolescents for nearly a decade, records show. On the Texas Medical Board's website, though, Dr. Javier Ruiz Nazario reported he had that specialized certification for treating children and adolescents. However, according to the website, he has not yet updated the board on the status of his board certification as required by its rules. Ruiz Nazario's name appears on various court documents that allege troubling practices at the Shiloh Treatment Center south of Houston, including affidavits and class action settlement motions in which children claim they were tackled and injected and forced to take pills identified as vitamins that made them dizzy and drowsy. Well, it's a brave new world, kiddo, isn't it? Many of the records specifically name Ruiz Nazario as a doctor who prescribed the medication. Kind of like a Mengele. The treatment center is operated by one of at least a dozen government contractors with turbulent histories that house children detained by U.S. Customs and Border Protection. To become board certified in child and adolescent psychiatry, doctors must prove they can perform an age-appropriate psychiatric interview, among other things, and pass an exam. Well, I suppose if a 1-year-old knows immigrant law enough to be able to testify in court, then these kids can take the Ritalin. You would think. Shiloh is categorized as a residential treatment center by the Office of Refugee Resettlement, gaining its first contract to house unaccompanied immigrant minors in 2013. Although the Resettlement Office previously had required board certification for grant applicants as part of a culturally competent interdisciplinary team months before Shiloh received its first payment, the agency dropped that requirement. Interesting. In a letter to attorneys in a lawsuit dated April 2nd, 2018, an official with the Federal Resettlement Agency makes 3 references to a board-certified psychiatrist working at Shiloh. The federal Florida settlement, stemming from a lawsuit first filed in 1997, this is the Florida settlement, by the way, requires that certain requirements on the federal government regarding detention and treatment of unaccompanied immigrant children. Attorneys representing immigrant children filed motions in the case in April asking a federal judge to halt the continuum of trauma that includes forcing children to take psychotropic medication at Shiloh. It is Shiloh's policy that in addition to monthly reviews of all their medication orders, or at least a quarterly basis, the board-certified child and adolescent psychiatrists who work with Shiloh to provide psychiatric care review current prescriptions of psychotropic medications, states the letter sent to Florida's counsel by James S. De La Cruz, Senior Federal Field Specialist with the Office of Refugee Resettlements Division of Children's Services. So Nazario has not been board certified for almost 10 years. There's horrendous instances of deaths and maimings and whatnot that have come out of this particular facility under this doctor's tenure. And I suppose something should be done. Well, let's get to our break, and we'll come back and go through weather from around the world, and then we'll finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Karen Hopkin. A good disguise keeps you hidden, right? Well, sometimes the best disguise is actually the most dazzling. because research reveals that flashy metallic iridescence can visually baffle predators, which allows colorful prey to survive another day. Those eye-popping results appear in the journal Scientific Reports. Shimmering iridescent coloration, which changes depending on the angle from which it's viewed, is favored by everything from birds to beetles and blossoms to butterflies.
And in our research group, we are of course interested in why this vivid metallic coloration is so taxonomically widespread in nature.
Karen Janjmo of the University of Bristol. She says that in some cases, the showy splashes of light are a sexual strategy.
Here I would like to point out that in some species, particularly those who display strong sexual dimorphism, such as birds of paradise or the peafowl, and even in some butterflies and fishes, the occurrence of iridescence is most likely driven by sexual selection. For example, in many of these cases, it is the males that have these vivid iridescent colors, and they use them in mate choice, so they use them as a signal to attract mates.
But iridescence also shows up in situations where reproduction is not an issue, for example in caterpillars or chrysalises.
So what we are studying now is whether natural selection imposed by predation could explain the occurrence of iridescence in prey animals.
The idea that eye-catching colors could be used as a cover-up isn't a new one.
The father of camouflage theory, Abbott Thayer, he really believed that iridescence should be categorized as a camouflage strategy. And he wrote in his famous life work, Concealing Coloration in the Animal Kingdom, already in 1909, that brilliantly changeable or metallic colors are among the strongest factors in an animal's concealment. And this sounds like a completely counterintuitive thing to say, because how can colors that are both brilliant and changeable contribute to animals' concealment?
After all, when we think of camouflage, we tend to think about blending into the background. But there are forms of camouflage, called disruptive coloration, that work by breaking up an animal's otherwise telltale shape.
In a similar way, we were asking whether iridescence, due to its changeability, could work as a form of camouflage by obstructing shape recognition.
Janjmo and her colleagues trained bumblebees to associate a particular shape, a circle or an oval, with a sugar reward. And they found that the bees, when given a choice, would preferentially visit the shape they knew to be sweet. But when the shapes were iridescent, the bees had trouble telling them apart.
It seemed that the strikingly iridescent surfaces on our targets visually broke up the otherwise recognizable shape of the targets,
which made them hard to distinguish. As for making use of this method for hiding in plain sight,
any practical applications is of course directly linked to any industry that has an interest in camouflage, that is, how to conceal objects or make them more difficult to recognize.
The researchers are currently conducting experiments with birds, which often prey on iridescent insects, to see if it helps to have a bird's eye view. Thanks for listening. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Karen Hopkin.
You are listening to 60 Second Civics, the daily podcast of the Center for Civic Education. I'm Mark Gage. Many of the American founders gave their first loyalty to their home states. From the very beginning of the Revolution, however, George Washington was a nationalist. His country was America, not Virginia, and what America could become through a strong union of the states. Later, as president, he would declare that Americans as citizens by birth or choice must always exalt the just pride of patriotism more than any appellation derived from local discriminations. In 1787, Washington's concerns about the disintegration of the nation prompted him to serve as a delegate to the Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia. He was convinced of the need for a strong national government. Washington presided over the convention, and his support was key to ratification of the newly proposed Constitution. He spoke rarely during the debates, in part because he was the presiding officer. That's all for today's podcast. 60 Second Civics, where civic education only takes a minute.
You can help stop the Trump agenda in its tracks. Make sure you're registered to vote. Go to rockthevote.org. And on November 6th, vote for Democrats up and down the ticket. This message, a public service from all the fine people of netrootsradio.com.
Workers in America have suffered a grave defeat. I'm Lily Ledbetter, and this is a Civil Liberties Minute with ACLU attorney Bill Newman.
In the just-decided Janus case, the Supreme Court, 5-4, decreed that members of a union who choose not to join, but who receive all of the benefits of membership, the pay, the representation, have the right to receive all those benefits for free. They get a free ride if they want it, and there is nothing the union or the other union members can do about that. Some commentators have described Janus as a conservative decision, but that characterization is wrong. Conservative, in the lexicon and tradition of courts, means respect for and adherence to previous decisions. It's called stare decisis, and it's a venerable legal principle. The Janus decision is not conservative. It throws out stare decisis. It overrules an over 40-year-old case that has been affirmed in the years since, a decision that was unanimous when it was made in 1977. What has changed is not the law. What has changed is the composition of the court. The Janus case erases a significant part of the power of the collective voice of public sector workers. With this decision, workers have suffered a grave defeat. There's just no way around that conclusion.
The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU because freedom can't protect itself.
For more than a century, the New York Times has unabashedly bragged in a banner slogan that it publishes, quote, all the news that's fit to print. Really? Then why did it publish a June 25th front-page article that was neither news nor fit to print? It was a gut job attacking our revolution, the aggressively progressive grassroots political movement that sprang out of Senator Bernie Sanders' 2016 presidential run. The Times scoffed that, quote, fewer than 50% of the more than 80 candidates OR has endorsed have won elections this year. Huh? Newsflash for clueless media cognoscenti. Winning anywhere near half of your campaigns is a stunning achievement. It's all the more stunning that it's being achieved by the feisty progressive rebels of our revolution. For nearly all of the candidates they endorse are unconventional, first-time contenders who start out with no name recognition, no fat cat money, and no support from establishment power brokers. I happen to be a board member of the upstart Our Revolution movement, so I know many of these gutsy mavericks personally, and I've seen their surprisingly successful campaigns from the ground level. They're winning because they're bringing political integrity and Bernie's big policy ideas to voters hungry for both, and because in less than 2 years, OR has organized hundreds of thousands of Democratic populists into more than 600 active political networks all across the country, including grassroots organizing in red areas the party has long ignored. This is Jim Hightower saying, asked about the Times mocking of the movement's win-loss record, Senator Sanders deadpanned, it's not a baseball game. In fact, though, even the biggest of baseball superstars have never come close to a 500 batting average, nor will the Times ever hit 500 on its pledge to cover all the news fit to print.
Need an antidote to the progressive blues? Want some good news about how grassroots folks are rebelling against the corporate powers and winning? Well, here's an easy-to-swallow pill for you, the Hightower Lowdown. Hightower's monthly newsletter will give you the lowdown, even as it lifts you up. It's 4 pages a month, jam-packed with facts you can use, actions you can take, and Jim's own Texas humor, all for only $15 a year. To become a lowdowner, go to hightowerlowdown.org.
This is Solidarity News on Radio Labour.
I'm Mark Boulanger. For years, the international labor movement has been arguing that austerity measures used by governments to cut back on services are counterproductive, that they cause more social unrest and unemployment and don't solve the underlying economic problems. The International Trade Union Confederation, for example, has been especially critical of the International Monetary Fund. The IMF is a United Nations body which operates independently. It was set up after the Second World War to help countries in economic difficulties. It was remarkably successful after World War II, but in the past few decades, it has been following a right-wing attack on governments in the countries it says it is trying to help. It has demanded hard austerity programs. Now, a report presented to the UN's Human Rights Council confirms what the labor movement has been saying all along, that the IMF's hard austerity demands don't work and cause needless suffering for the poor and the working poor in countries. Philip Alston is the UN Special Rapporteur who prepared the report. He was interviewed by Daniel Johnson of UN Radio.
Challenge for the IMF is to combine its various recommendations for what they would call fiscal prudence, which basically could be translated as austerity or cutting back on deficits and so on, to combine that with policies that will protect the most vulnerable people in the society, because normally when governments cut back on their expenditure, if they have to reduce their overall expenditure by 2, 3, 4%, the people who are going to feel it most are those who are relying on sort of minimal government services. And so the challenge for the IMF is to make sure that it can both promote more fiscal prudence, but at the same time protect money for social purposes.
But if I might just jump in there, in your report that you presented to the Human Rights Council, you detailed the economic, not political, motivations of the IMF. And you said that there was some flexibility. The IMF wasn't particularly minded to ensure that there was a social safety net. It was more interested in ensuring that international exchange rates for things like the peso were guaranteed, that there was no actual guarantee that the very poorest, or even not the very poorest, but those who actually needed help, were going to get it from the IMF.
I think the big change is encapsulated in a bizarre word that the fund uses itself, which is macro-criticality. What that means is that they now think that there are a number of factors which actually influence macroeconomic outcomes, which are not purely economic. So, in other words, if you can protect the poorest and the most vulnerable, that will have some impact on the macroeconomic situation in a range of ways. First of all, you head off riots and demonstrations, which can make any package fail. Secondly, if you can protect the health and well-being and the capacity of poor people to contribute to the economy, that too is an important positive factor. So they are starting to see that in the overall, even economic equation, there are benefits to addressing these social issues. My report is certainly critical, but I think it's actually constructive, and I do think that it coincides with serious efforts within the IMF to bring about change. They're interested in succeeding. They're not interested in continuing to have all these riots, continuing to have the pushback, the bad reputation, and to be promoting conditions in which populism does flourish. I think they would like to find a new recipe. And I think by providing some sort of external impetus to devote more attention to the search for social protection measures, that it can actually work. The question then indeed is, should the fund restrict itself to a very narrow range of issues in relation to which it's going to lay down hard terms, hard conditions?
And that's it. International labor news you can use. Thank you for listening. And remember, it's all about global solidarity.
From UN headquarters in New York, I'm Luke Vargas with your World in 2 Minutes. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo wrapped up 2 days of meetings in North Korea over the weekend. Hours after he departed, North Korea's foreign ministry chided the U.S. for repeating its, quote, gangster-like demand for denuclearization. That comment got a lot of media coverage, as some implied Pompeo had been played, or that President Trump's much-touted diplomatic summit in Singapore had come to naught, especially amid reports of North Korea's continued nuclear activity.
Overall, the focus on this gangster comment, ignoring 90% of the rest of the statement, I think really did a disservice to what it actually said.
Joel Witt is the founder of 38 North, a D.C. research group dedicated to North Korea.
The Singapore summit declaration did not mean that North Korea would stop everything it was doing in the nuclear and missile areas right away. nor would I find that to be a reasonable expectation.
Ambassador Robert Gallucci was America's top negotiator with North Korea in the mid-1990s and says the public should set reasonable expectations for progress, and so should President Trump.
It's unfortunate, I think, when the president essentially does his version of mission accomplished and says, we don't have a threat from the North anymore, you can sleep tonight. That's really flat-out misleading.
North Korean denuclearization could be years away, but Witt says one thing Pompeo can do to up the chances of success is expand his involvement in the diplomatic process, and he could do worse than model his engagement after John Kerry's sustained work toward the Iran nuclear deal.
Right now, flying into Pyongyang 2 days at a time, leaving, coming back a month later, having a working group working on specific issues at the DMZ, that's not going to do it. We're not going to get there quickly with that kind of process.
Luke Vargas, The United Nations.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. And looks like we got some good weather coming up here locally and around the world. And so, along the banks of the Rogue River and the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, it is currently 61 degrees. We're going to be pretty much nearly the same as yesterday, which was upper 80s, low 90s, and might get a little bit of wind. Let's see what they have in store for us. Okay, indeed, in a couple of hours, we'll be going up to 5 to 10 miles per hour. Right now, winds are out of the southwest at just about 1 mile per hour. And they will be then shifting in a couple of hours out of the north-northwest at 5 to 10. And then tonight they will then shift out of just the northwest at 10 to 15 miles per hour, a scouring wind. I love that. Yes, indeed. We do have a little bit of chance of precipitation tonight. Very small, but that's because of possible thunderstorm activity when you mix hot and cold air. Though the air hasn't been so terribly cold, but there must be somewhere because we might have some of that. Dry conditions will continue until then. Grass pollen is high. Air quality index is considered good at 29 parts per million, but just put it at 30 and then it's not so good. It's only moderate. Daytime UV index also remains very high at 9. High pressure dominates the area at 30.12 inches. Visibility is up to 10 miles per hour. Humidity is at 70%, but will fall to about 28% later. And though we will hopefully have some kind of drops of rain, that's always a good thing. We are going to be creeping up into triple digits by the end of the week and through the weekend. And okay. Well, that's at least it's not L.A. Our triple digits are only going to be 104, at least 104. Not as hot as it is in Southern California, though. Okay, weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. Oh, wow, London is 67 and cloudy. Well, you would expect that. Paris is 73 and sunny. Oh my, how lovely. Rome is 87 and fair. That could be lovely too. Kiev is 77 and fair. Kabul is 87 degrees and fair, but with wind, and hopefully that keeps the drones away. Hong Kong is 80 degrees and clear. Tokyo is 81 and partly cloudy, and they have a thunderstorm advisory and heat advisory. Sydney, Australia is 50 degrees and clear. San Francisco, California is 57 degrees and sunny. And New York, New York is 85 degrees, sunny, with a heat advisory too, so stay cool. I know you will. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by People's Personal Weather Stations. That they purchased, these people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property. And these people positively live around the world. Casey Michelle from Think Progress brings us this first offering here at the chef's table of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. In early March, Lauren Southern, a Canadian darling of white supremacists, learned that she had been barred from the UK on account of her history of thinly veiled racism. Now, Southern can add another country to the list of places she can no longer visit. On Monday, Australian media reported that Southern's application for an Australian visa has been denied. As Sky News' Ross Cameron tweeted, the Australian Visa Bureau had declined Southern's application for an electronic travel authority. Southern promptly took to Twitter to complain, saying she is still attempting to fight for entry. Australia's denial is the latest embarrassment for Southern. Not only was she booted from the UK, but a few weeks ago, she and Brittany Pettibone, another conspiracy theorist who once referred to herself as one of the leading authorities on Pizzagate, we reported on that, conducted an interview with Russian neo-fascist Alexander Dugin. How nice. Hard-hitting, too, because some of the hard-hitting questions that Southern lobbed at Dugin included queries such as, what are the most important challenges facing the millennial generation today, particularly in the Western world? And how would you suggest that millennials live their life when they don't want to be part of liberalism? Oh, my God. Southern, who couches much of her rhetoric in barely veiled bigotry, preferring to spew anti-Islam diatribes and moan about the victims of multiculturalism, denies that she is a white supremacist. Well, don't they all? Like many other far-right voices, she initially made a name for herself on YouTube. Oh, how nice. However, she has made a habit of palling around with outspoken white supremacists over the past few months. Last month, she grinned alongside James Alsop, who marched alongside white supremacist organizations in last year's deadly Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville, Virginia. And she has also insisted that white supremacist Richard Spencer is not, in fact, a white supremacist. Even Richard Spencer would deny that Southern's claim that he's not, because he is. Southern had planned on visiting Australia to take part in a speaking tour alongside Stéphane Molyneux, another Canadian conspiracy theorist. Like Southern, Molyneux denies he's a white supremacist, but he has, among other things, claimed the word racism is the new N-word and stated that freedom has a eugenics component to it inevitably. Yeah, Molyneux. Okay, well, let's see. The steps taken by officials in Australia and New Zealand to stop Southern speaking plans follow on the heels of Poland's recent announcement that it had barred Spencer from traveling through much of the European Union and was deporting him back to the U.S. Per one of Spencer's contacts in Sweden, where the white supremacist had been traveling to before he was detained by Polish authorities, Spencer has been banished from Europe for several years. All three of them, Southern, Molyneux, and Spencer, had advocated for strong borders. All three, apparently, have now found governments that will listen.
Je te donne c'est mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle, c'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Luke Barnes of Think Progress brings us this last offering here at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. In case you've been living under a rock for the last month, you're probably aware of the fact that there's a small soccer tournament underway in Russia. If you're looking for a reprieve for the daily drumbeat of awful news stories, then you still have one more week to get involved in a World Cup, which so far has been insanely good. The current world champions, Germany, was dumped out in the group stages. Russia beat Spain by the skin of their teeth in the round of 16 to spark incredible scenes in the streets of Moscow. Meanwhile, England are into their first World Cup semifinal since 1990 and are now just 2 victories away from miming the most unlikely of triumphs into reality. And today sees the first 2 semifinalists, France and Belgium, face off in St. Petersburg. On paper, it promises to be a scintillating match with some of the world's most in-demand attacking players competing for a spot in the final. But the true strength of both these teams lies not in the prowess of one star player, but in the full-fledged embrace of a multicultural identity. Now let's start with France. Of the 11-man squad to beat Uruguay 2-0 in the quarterfinals, 6 were either born outside of France or to immigrant parents. They include Raphael Varane, whose father is from Martinique, Paul Pogba, France's $120 million rated midfielder, is of Guinean heritage, while teenage superstar Kylian Mbappe has a Cameroonian father and an Algerian mother. And I got to tell you, that kid, he's a teenager, first of all, 19, and he has speed. Oh, man, I love watching that kid play. A similar level of multiculturalism is seen with Belgium. 2 of the Red Devils' talismans, Vincent Kompany and Romelu Lukaku, have Congolese heritage. And Lukaku, what a huge player he is. It's not just a game for this little guys. The guy can turn on a dime, too. While other members of Belgium's golden generation include players with ties to Martinique, Morocco, and the Balkans. See? Lukaku in particular stands out, a towering striker who can speak 6 languages, has recently wrote a piece for the Players' Tribune documenting his struggles growing up in a low-income community in Antwerp, Belgium. I'd come home at night and the lights would be shut off. No electricity for 2-3 weeks at a time, he said. I'd want to take a bath and there would be no hot water. My mom would heat up a kettle on the stove and I'd stand in the shower splashing the warm water on top of my head with a cup. To outsiders, it might seem a bit strange that players with Congolese or Martinique heritage are playing for France and Belgium, but under FIFA's eligibility rules, players are allowed to represent any country they have a clear connection to by birth, parents, or grandparents. And the multicultural success symbol of Belgium and France's World Cup teams is even more pertinent, bearing in mind the country's recent relationship with its immigrant communities. The failure of the European security services to spot danger lurking in their own backyard has helped fuel the rise of xenophobic populism visible across Europe. In 2017, for instance, the far-right French candidate Marine Le Pen got to the second round of the French election for the first time before being defeated by Emmanuel Macron. Le Pen had previously lamented that when I look at Les Bleus, I don't recognize France or myself. Well, of course she doesn't. She's white. Very white. So white she can't see any of the other colors around her. And so I'm glad that, France and Belgium really show us what we can be and what we should be. And really, what we are. All right. That's the end of our broadcast for today, but we'll be back tomorrow for Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. Yes, we do that. Will no one rid me of this priest? Well, we'll see. So stay tuned to Netroots Radio for more breaking news, and we will visit with you tomorrow in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théâtres, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum, 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 dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum, 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 dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver, dans mon jardin d'hiver.